הכנס, המרכז למחקרי ביטחון לאומי, אנחנו ממשיכים בשידורים המיוחדים מכאן, ואנחנו עכשיו אומרים שלום לשניים שמצטרפים אלינו לאולפן השקוף שלנו. Mr. Marty Indyk is Vice President and Director of Foreign Policy Program at the Brookings Institution of Washington DC and former Ambassador to Israel. ופרופסור איתמר רבינוביץ, לשעבר השגריר ישראל בארצות הברית, משנה ליושב ראש הוועד המנהל במכון למחקרי ביטחון לאומי. שלום.
שלום.
First of all, we're gonna discuss now Israel-US relations that are, let me ask you, if it's the worst that we have ever seen.
No, it's hard to compare, but there are plenty of crises in the US-Israel relationship that go back a very long way, back to 1956 with President Eisenhower and David Ben-Gurion. And it's not surprising that even though the relationship is one of great closeness and the ties have deepened and broadened over the years since then, nevertheless, Israel is a small power in a very dangerous neighborhood, and the United States is a superpower, vast oceans surrounding it, and friendly neighbors, Canada and Mexico. So its strategic circumstances are very different. And Israel's margin of security is much narrower than the United States. So naturally there are differences. But there have always been stronger differences between Democratic presidents and Likud prime ministers. It's a kind of left-right thing.
But when you go that way back, how would you describe, what were the main obstacles between the US and Israel during the years? Mr. Rabinowitz, you can answer.
עברית או אנגלית?
English.
English,
So
okay. No problem.
Gentlemen could understand.
No problem. I fully agree with Ambassador Indyk. Over the years, we've had some very bad moments. In the early 50s, we had a negative attitude that people like Secretary Marshall and Dulles were not friends of Israel. Actually would have preferred that Israel had not been born as a state. So we have the watershed of 1967, after which we gradually built this very close alliance. And there is a major difference between the, say, quarrels of the 50s and 60s and the disagreements between or among friends post 1967. And now, in this regard, at present, there are some fundamental disagreements over Iran, over the Palestinian issue, over the general outlook of President Obama at the Middle East and Prime Minister Netanyahu, and it is also a right-left issue. It is also very much a personal issue between two individuals who distrust one another, and it is therefore a very difficult moment in the relationship. The fabric is still there. It's obviously not good for the fabric for this particular route to continue. It's also very bad for the issue to become a partisan issue in the United States.
Right.
One of our major achievements over the years was to turn Israel into a bipartisan issue, and now unfortunately it's becoming a partisan issue. So the sooner the better to put an end to this row and try to restore the relationship to its healthy course.
And that this course is not happening right now. We heard some, I would say, rumors lately about some tremendous disconnection between the US and Israel. Those rumors, I must say, were denied. Mr. Indyk, could you ever see any chance that US officials would ask to lower the connection to a level that we never seen before?
You mean diplomatically?
Of course.
No, I don't imagine that would happen. Look, we have disagreements with allies on a fairly regular basis. The relationship between the United States and France, for instance, has gone through difficult times. The United States and Germany, and so that because they are our allies, as is Israel, we don't resort to those kinds of diplomatic responses. I think that in this particular case, what worries me, as well as what Itamar said about the way in which this is being played as a partisan issue, which is tremendously damaging to the relationship. It's that there seems no way out of this confrontation, because it's not just about whether there should be a speech or not. The Prime Minister of Israel is saying that the President of the United States is negotiating, quote, a very bad deal, unquote.
Yeah.
And
this criticism is not acceptable.
He is determined
Yeah.
to prevent that deal from going through, even to the extent of going over or around the president's head and appealing to the U.S. Congress.
Yeah.
And that conflict over the deal with Iran is likely to continue potentially for months. So that bothers me a great deal, is that we're now on a kind of confrontation course in which it's very hard to see how both sides are going to pull back. The president has said he will veto any kind of congressional resolution designed to impose more sanctions on Iran. Yeah. And the Prime Minister of Israel is going to the Congress to try to get that very resolution.
And at this point, I would like to say to ask you, Mr. Rabinowitz, would you tell that the Prime Minister of Israel shouldn't go these times to the Congress, or the opposite?
Yeah, I can say that, but just yesterday he was very explicit in insisting that he intends to go, and the ambassador in Washington says that the damage in the relationship is less significant than the damage of the Iranian deal. So I can give a gratuitous advice. It won't make a difference. I would like to point to the importance of the March 17 date of the Israeli elections in two respects. One is the administration's response to the Prime Minister's moves has been very restrained, because they calculated that a tough American response, a tough administration response, measures taken against the current government might be counterproductive from their point of view in the elections, because it may play into the hands of the Prime Minister. So they are very, very cautious in their public responses. Secondly, it is very important to wait and see what government emerges in Israel out of the March 17 elections, and then what policy will be pursued on the two contentious issues, namely Iran and the Palestinian issue. So, from my point of view, the more important date is not the date of the speech, but the date of the elections.
Yeah. Mr. Indyk, the U.S. involvement in what's happening in the Middle East has been grown, like Mr. Rabinovich says. It's not only Palestinians anymore, it's Iran, it's ISIS, it's the Palestinians in Israel, it's Syria, it's Iraq. Do you see any situation that the U.S. government, this on the next one in the future, would say, this is not our business?
I do think that there is a war weariness amongst the American public.
Right.
Bear in mind that the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan have been the longest war in American history. There has been a huge investment of blood, American blood, and American treasure to no really good result. Certainly not in Iraq, where we now have ISIS rising, and in Afghanistan it's still a big question as to what the future holds there after all of the American effort. So there's a feeling on the part of the American people that it's not worth it. Now, what does that actually mean in practice? It means certainly a great deal of reluctance to put what they call boots on the ground, to American land warfare in the Middle East. But that doesn't mean that the United States, which remains the most powerful in the world by far, isn't prepared to deploy its air force, as we're doing in Syria and Iraq, or its navy, as we have in the Gulf, to protect American interests and American allies, which includes Israel. So I think we need to keep this in perspective. One other factor, though, is also important. The United States is now no longer dependent on Middle Eastern oil. And therefore, the strategic stakes have been reduced for the United States. Of course, our allies in Europe and Japan and our major trading partners, China and India, are dependent on Middle Eastern oil. And so we still have an interest in the free flow of oil, but it's not the same strategic interest. It doesn't require us to go into Kuwait to kick out Saddam Hussein.
And it's really interesting what's going to be here in the future. Unfortunately, this is all the time that we have right now. And former ambassadors, Mr. Itamar Rabinovic and Mr. Indyk, thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
עד כאן הדיון הזה, אנחנו נשוב לדיון סיכום בהמשך, מיד נמשיך.
תודה רבה.